companies that are utilizing it to help drive are the ones that are much more transformational and having more success.
Hey, what's up YouTube? Jeremiah Hersey here, and today we're going to be talking about row context. Now, row context is when you're working with inside of a table in a calculated column or with inside of row context of a X function or an iterator function, which we'll talk about later videos. But the idea of row context is that as we're creating this column with inside of a table, inside of Power BI, we are stuck in that table. We're not able to reach out to any other tables without a navigation function, which we'll talk about in other videos. But the idea is that we can only work one row at a time. So as we create a calculated column with inside of a table inside of Power BI, it is only looking at one row at a time for information. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. If you want to follow along, if you look in the description, there is a PBIX link to download so you can follow along. So here we are inside of my customer table. And once again, just a quick recap from last time. We created these relationships between the tables. The one-to-many means that the one side, the customer side, is unique. So it's a unique list of customers. And then we have our fact table, the many side of the relationship, as denoted by the star symbol there. And so there is a relationship between these tables, but if I wanted to pull any information out of the sales table in a calculated column, I would have to use a navigation function. So what you're going to see here is as we go to create this column, so we're just going to go over to the customer table, and there's several ways to do this. If you look under the table tools option here at the top, you'll see the option to create a new table, a new measure, a new column. We're going to be creating a new column in this case. And I just want to explain what row context is and how it works. So as we create a calculated column inside of Power BI, and it is recommended that if you're going to be creating columns that you do so inside the Power Query editor. Okay, so best practice is to create your columns inside the Power Query editor. Sometimes you're going to have to use DAX, but the idea here is that as we're creating this column, we can only look at one row at a time. And so as I go to create my expression here, it can only see this first row. That's it. So to help you get a better understanding of this, I'm going to use the primary contact and the postal code just to give you an idea of how this works, to show you that it's only looking at one line. Now, if you want to make this formula bar a little bit bigger, if you hold down the control key and scroll up on your mouse wheel, it will increase the size of your formula bar. All right, so to call out to a column with inside of a table, best practice is to call out to the table first using single tick marks. So I'm going to use a single tick mark here to call out to my customer table. Notice the IntelliSense helping me out. I'm going to hit Tab on my keyboard to autocomplete. And then what I'm going to pull in this case is the primary contact. So I'm going to use a square bracket to call out to the column. And there's the primary contact. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate or put these two together here. And so I'm going to put the customer with the postal code, just so you have an idea of what's going on. Now you can also use your arrow keys or your mouse and scroll down and select the one that you want. There's postal code. All right, so that's all we're going to do for this one. Once again, the whole purpose of this is just to explain row context. So when I hit enter here, this column is going to be created. And you can start to see how row context works. So for the first row, it's going to take the primary contact and the postal code from the first row, and it's going to put the two together. Then, as we go on to the next row, Lorena Cindric, 90216, we can see it right here. So that's how row context works. It can only see within one row at a time. If I were to create a new column here and try to reach out to my sales table, watch what happens when I try to reach out to my sales table. I put a single tick mark and I type in S for sales. Notice that nothing is happening. Okay? So when we're talking about row context, and this is very important, row context means you can only see one row at a time inside of a table, and any active relationships are deactivated in this case. That allows row context, that allows Power BI to iterate over the table and to perform the expression without getting incorrect answers. And so while row context is important, we have to understand that it deactivates relationships between tables. We're only looking at one table right now, which is the customer table. Let's jump to another table to see how it affects that table. All right, so same thing here. I'm going to go over to my city table. So I'm going to leave column 2 here. It'll disappear because I didn't put anything in there. I'm going to go over to my city table here, and we're going to create a new column. Once again, row context means that I can only work with inside of this table. So I'm inside the city table. So when I go to call it to a table, notice that the only one that is available right now is the city table, no longer customer, because I'm in the city table. So as you're creating these columns with inside of Power BI, you have to understand that row context is in play. It can only see one row at a time, and it can't use any other tables for information. So once again, we can create something here. Let's maybe call out to the city, and we'll put a comma in here, and then we'll do maybe the state. Okay, so I'm going to use the state province here. So it's just going to combine the city, comma, the state province. So we'll go ahead and return that. And we can see it is now formatted the way we want it to. So let me get a good zoom in here. So row 1, row context, is Livingston, New York. If I choose a different one down here, here's Middleville, New York. As I go all the way across, you can see Middleville, New York. So this is row context. It can only see the columns within inside of the table that you're currently in. So it's going to pull the information from the row to create the new column. And once again, I just want to say this. If you have the availability to create these columns inside the Power Query editor, that's where you want to create these columns, not necessarily inside of Power BI using DAX. So if you can create these columns inside the Power Query, highly recommend you do it there. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content, and I'll see you in the next one.